The first one comes from Creeper, and it's an album that's called Sanguivore. And just from an album being called Sanguivore, I know it's for me, right? Creeper are, of course, almost like the original TNM favourite band. They are pretty much the best songwriters currently working in rock music. They bring a show and a universe every time that is a different thing that they go all out with on every single album. And they are also maybe pretty well established at this point. Like, I know they are the go-to band where we go, any Justice in a different timeline, this band are literally the biggest rock band in the world, bar none. How the hell are these songs not that popular? But over the course, the early EPs, unbelievable debut album that sealed all that promise, then a dramatic transformation on the second album, I guess we've seen where Creeper's kind of lot is, I guess, really. And, now, I don't know exactly what else happens. The buzz around this album has been massive for Creeper fans, as you would expect. I don't know how much bigger each subsequent album is going to get them. That's by the by, I guess. The relevant part, I want to say, is that Sex, Death and the Infinite Void was the first massive transformation for Creeper. Like, going from, the kind of the callous heart horror punk era Creeper into a completely different vibe. The making of that album seemed to be a huge story unto itself. I don't know if that's the case here, but there was the podcast series and everything that went along with that last record. This album, by comparison, just seems to kind of pop up, and they all seem to be in happier spirits. Sex, Death and the Infinite Void, what I guess I'm saying was the revelation of what a malleable Creeper would be, right? Like, yeah. I don't think it's quite said enough now, a few years on, but like that is one of the boldest rock albums of recent times. Like, in my musical lifetime, I have heard very little like it, since the days of My Chemical Romance taking enormous swings album upon album. When Sanguivore was unveiled, it was almost a given by comparison that, yeah, of course, Creeper were going to go for something different again. And there was very little shock or resistance to that idea, I guess. It's like that had been gotten out of the way, and we're just down for, new era of Creeper, new sound, new vibe, new look. What's going on?
Yeah, I think is that the transformation, the era being a distinct thing was just because there was such a jump between Eternity in Your Arms and Sex Death that they almost kind of like got the shock of the change out of the way before, so that everyone was kind of ready for it. And so when they, like say, they had that big dramatic killing off of the Will Gould from the last era at the Roundhouse, it was very much beginning of like how Ghost do, like the new Papa. It was kind of like, and we've now got a new Will Gould on stage. So it felt like the idea that a new era of Creeper is going to be something totally different is something, rather than to be feared or kind of concerned about what it's going to be, it's just part of the celebration for fans now.
Yeah, and so this record is kind of, I guess, the summation of what started back when they cut Will Gould's head off on stage at the Roundhouse. I feel like the difference between this and Sex, Death and the Infinite Void is that this move on Sanguivore is so much less surprising than that album. And I don't mean that in a disparaging sense. And not just because, like I said, the establishment of Creeper as a shape-shifting force has happened now. But what I mean is, Sex, Death and the Infinite Void was like the album that I didn't know I wanted from Creeper. That you
didn't know you wanted them to do a Britpop album, basically. Like almost.
That kind of Brits in America mix of like British rock music and indie even, with like all that Americana, which obviously that evolved and came to further fruition on the American Noir EP. That's not what I would have put down as like my next musical move for Creeper. Sanguivore, even though there were things in the singles that made my eyes like widen in shock that they'd gone there, by contrast you go, yeah, of course they've done like a Lost Boys Steinman vampire album. That is exactly the move that you would have expected from them, right? Like Sex, Death and the Infinite Void is the album I didn't know I wanted, and I loved it. Sanguivore is exactly the album that we knew we wanted. An awful lot of the Creeper fan base who are into the same shit. And so, like, yeah, of course, everyone seems to love it. It's less like a radical detour, even though it's musically just as ambitious. It's more like fulfillment of a promise from like several years ago. Like, even the look, going from that sort of like new wavy aesthetic that they had on Sex, Death to leather jackets and covered in blood. It's like, yeah, that's kind of just what we'd all imagine with Creeper anyway.
Yeah, totally agree with that whole like wish fulfillment of kind of like they finally hit that like, okay, fine, we'll give you peak vampire fantasy. Let's fucking go.
I don't know where they go from this. Like this is like, oh yeah, they've done the massively obvious thing. What do they do next? Obviously that's a surprise and a treasure that we're waiting to see. But this album does have a lot less surprise attached to it, and it's not that I never considered Creeper would do this the way the last album was. even though obviously the vast majority of it is a thing that we've not necessarily heard them, write before. It's just so obvious that they'll be good at it. And so for myself and for Sam, I'm sure as well, this is just like, oh yeah, all's right with the world. We've got like a lovely vampire bed to climb into. The prophecy has been fulfilled. I want to quickly turn to the unknown factor, I guess, before we talk about it, because Elliot, I'm still sussing out where you are with Creeper. Like, you seem to like them, but occasionally a little bit more spoil sport about certain pieces of their back catalogue. So, is Creeper doing what Sanguivore is as natural a crowd pleaser for you as it is for us, who are just like, yeah, I like this, give it?
Well, yeah, so for me, one of the things that I kind of wanted from Creeper all along was that I wanted them to be kind of more of the things that I liked about them and less of the things I wasn't so sure about. So I guess that's true of all bands, but like Sex, Death and the Infinite Void, for example, I kind of liked that they were playing with T-Rex and Bowie and the, like you say, the UK indie side of things, but it wasn't really... I don't really like those things generally. I quite like T-Rex. I'm not that big on Bowie. Like it was one of those where
I'm not either. I love it when Creeper do it, seemingly, which is probably the same fucking Meatloaf. But yeah, go on.
Well, this is so for me. It's always been like a thing where they combine a number of things I like, but I've always had kind of questions about how they go about doing it. So like when it was a more punky early stuff and onto Eternity in Your Arms, the stuff I liked about that I thought was great. But when they would sort of slip into Andrew Lloyd Webber territory, like on I Choose to Live, or I still don't really get on with Misery, for example.
What?
Like,
that's worse than saying you don't like I Choose to Live. But okay, fine.
Terrible.
There's always been these caveats, and even when they're combining lots of things I like, I've always had those caveats. But they've never... None of the bands that I've mentioned so far, as great as many of them are, including things like Bowie and the like, none of those bands have done anything as good as Bat Out of Hell, right? Which, for my money, is one of the great rock albums ever.
Fair
and a contender for the best to sell in the numbers that it did. If you want to talk about like Back in Black, the Black Album, Nevermind, Bat Out of Hell could take them all. And for me, for Creeper, they've always hinted at that. And to 2-foot plunge into the deep end this time around, it's the best Creeper album.
I don't know if I agree, but I am elated that at the very least we could all just like get on here, because yeah, big surprise, Creeper have done their big mega goth opera album and we love it. Big shocker. Even saying so, the revelations that Creeper offer while working within this zone that we all expect them to do are still so rewarding. It's the album that we expected them to get around to making at some point, but seeing it in action is another thing entirely. Like, and yeah, Creeper do Meatloaf stuff quite well. They always have. Yeah. They haven't done a 9-minute full Bat Out of Hell moment to open an album, though, before.
Yeah, it's always been like, the end bit of like Down Below, or like those bridges where he goes for me. Like it's been, sprinkled into punk songs. This one, when the moment I saw, like I say, the album's opening with a 9-minute song, I was like, I haven't even heard it. I know what that's going to be, and it better be just like the purest kind of Steinman worship imaginable. Go full on, like, Steinman, Meatloaf, Bat Out of Hell, epic, whatever you want to, like the comparison which you want to make, and that is exactly what I got the moment I hit play on this record. And I didn't care about the rest of the album from then. I was like, I'm in heaven. This is everything to me. Like, what a song to open your album with.
I mean, it opens with a piano hook that could start a Cradle of Filth song, and then it goes, "Hold my beer." We're going to get more ridiculous than that. Like, I think it's the best example of a song I've heard this year that actually fulfills that cheesy cliche of like, oh, it doesn't feel 9 minutes long, because like
it doesn't.
The transition through it. Will doesn't start singing till nearly the 2-minute mark, and every time he does, I'm like, oh shit, where did those 2 minutes go? Like, none of it's wasted, and everything in that song arrives exactly when it means to, and the ramp up on it, the way the verses escalate, the rolling toms coming in, bringing it all up and up, and bringing the momentum in. It feels like classic songwriting, and the chorus is outrageous, legitimately full on. How did Meatloaf not sing that on one of the most famous songs ever in 1980 or something? Again, I don't even really like Meatloaf very much. I'm not that guy who listens to... Mate, you don't like Misery, shut up. I'm just saying, I don't really listen to Bat Out of Hell, and I hear this and go, my Armageddon girl. It's just fucking undeniable.
There hasn't been a day where I've just not sung to myself, my Armageddon girl could end your world in one look. Like,
it's so sick.
That is just like, yeah, that, like, it's been a good year for like girls destroying the world, innit, with this and the Great Pleasures album. Like, the goths are up for their horny girl destruction world stuff. But yeah, that chorus, like, it's that pre-chorus, but every time it sort of ramps up there for him to burst into that. The second verse on this song might be my favourite thing Creeper have ever done, just for Will giving us the most ludicrous line I think that's ever going to come out of his mouth, which is "I'm Jesus in a strip club giving head."
I think there are even better ones later in the album.
Potentially, there are so many amazing lines across this album, but I cackled when I heard that, and I had to just feel like, Will, behave when you're singing that, because like, Jesus in a strip club giving head, like, come on, it fucking, like, this song, I can't stop with this song. Every little part of it is just perfect to me.
The reason why I gasped when you said you didn't like Bat Out of Hell, Perrin, is because it's almost scandalous how much this song takes from that song.
I'm not saying I dislike
So...
Meatloaf.
Like,
it's never quite clicked for me personally, but yeah.
Ridiculous. But like the extended intro, like the constant refrain of the melodies, that wow now 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 now, coming in all these different ways, faster and slower, like the drama, the skyscraper melodies. It even kind of mimics that the motorbike revving thing towards the end in a different way. It's like the lawsuits are millimeters away, lads.
Well, they've tributed the album to Steinman. I think that's how they're getting away with it. Like...
All right, sneaky. But the thing is, I don't mind because I love being in this world so much. Like, it's such a great song. I will even forgive the fade out because I don't want that little melodic hook to disappear at any point. Like you say, 9 minutes. Again, as someone who likes Creeper, but I have my reservations. If you'd have something like a 9-minute Creeper song, I could have winced at it. I could have been unsure. But when it's just like Bat Out of Hell 4, make it 12 minutes.
I mean, for me, I feel like Creeper a few years ago maybe could have done like the first stretch of that song. The actual most impressive part of it for me, and one of the things that really marks it out as being, sort of Sanguivore, is the switch up, because that part with the hell choir vocals.
That bit is so good, yeah.
It could be Steinman just as much as it could be some fucking mental Disney song from The Lion King or something. Like, it's a mind blower
so much theatre to
when
it
reaches that point. And despite being the song with all of these different sections, it feels cohesive. It doesn't feel like just a jumble of disconnected songs, despite how different in mood the back end is from the beginning. It's just like an insane payoff on the already mega first part. It's, 2 world-class hooks in one stretch, Dominion Mother Russia style. It's so comfortable to hear them doing this stuff, because it's so clearly the kind of songwriting that the members of Creeper personally yearn for. Like, this time, even more than any other time, I think, it's like they've written an album to do a kind of thing that they personally want to hear in today's landscape that they aren't hearing. Like, the whole album works because it's so clearly a labour of love, and it's not a major processing of demons or anything this time, but it's just, we want an album like this to exist, so we're going to make it exist. It's just like, it's yearning for a kind of bombastic rock music that isn't the fashion anymore, majorly. Like, the obvious only other band who have made it their trade and gotten particularly successful is Ghost, which is why people always compare it. But, it's wanting to have all of the excess. It's the kind of thing, when we spoke so heavily about Impera last year, and it was my album of the year, it was like, often throughout rock's history, the things that capture people and define a point in time are the things that are bold and are like unashamedly ludicrous and over the top, and that's something that's been so shied away from in recent decades because people think it's silly or they can't commit to it without sniggering or whatever because they're cowards. Even pop music has moved away from like Katy Perry shooting milkshakes out of her tits or whatever towards like intimate bedroom pop stuff. And Sanguivore, even more than anything else Creeper have ever done, is them looking that camp in the eye and not flinching and putting, through force of will, all of that into actuality, even when it is wildly out of step with what the zeitgeist is. And I find hearing that not just rewarding, but relieving, like, oh, finally, some good fucking food.
Look, that's why I think this is the coolest album I've heard this year, in a way, because, like, you look at what is currently popular on music, and, all the bands trying to, like, models, and it's all very street style, and it's just shit like Bad Omens and the stuff I rag on all the time that's so synthetic looking. This feels like a band who are just, again, totally out of step with that. They are leather jackets and strutting their stuff, and it's camp and theatre, and that to me is so much more, like I say, so much more rewarding because it is bold and invigorating and exciting, and there's so much passion to it. It doesn't feel like, none of this feels like it's pleasing an algorithm or like There are bands you listen to, you're going to go like, that could be written by an AI. It's so designed to just tick boxes for what is popular right now. None of that here. This is, so, I say, such a labour of love. And that just comes through in the songs and makes them sound even more brilliant than they actually are. Like,
well, it's also like, that is the thing that even, like, Bat Out of Hell, we talk about as like one of the big albums of the 70s. At the time, that was a mental...
It's
like,
ludicrous, yeah.
It was seen to be like it was going to be a disaster. They shopped with like 40 record labels or something, and it involved just Steinman and Meatloaf slamming on the desk, like trying to hum out the songs and stuff. Like that whole thing. And you're just pitching it now, like 7 songs, most of which are over 8 minutes. And there's like heavy metal, there's doo-wop, there's pop, there's jazz, there's, you know,
theatre.
There's theatre. It's just like the most insane thing. But like you say, it just through sheer like escapism and how likeable those songs and that style is, it gets through. And on one hand, like you say, it's nice to listen to Creeper and not think there's anything cynical about it whatsoever. But listening to a song like this, I just think it'd be such a shame if it didn't do the thing that the other bands are going for and taking the kind of slipstream, like the easy way to it.
Yeah, and sonically, this album, I mean, I don't know exactly. You know, I'm not privy to anything. To me, it sounds like slightly less expensive than Sex, Death and Infinite Void was, but like that kind of that big American sound that they had there, like all of the orchestration and things that they incorporated on those songs sounded so lavish, like a really big step up from, you know, Southampton punk. This, they've done it at home, and maybe the sonic fidelity not quite at that level, but all of the bells and whistles they feasibly can attach to it to make it larger than life are there, which is a different kind of endearing. Like the xylophone lines alone, adding all of those extra hooks through like Chapel Gates or Further Than Forever, just a joy to hear. I like that you can imagine as a through line on this, they've gone, okay, every single song, despite how different they all are, needs to somehow evoke Cry Little Sister from the Lost Boys soundtrack. Like it's that exact kind of hushed but uber dramatic, quasi-religious, you know, escapist absurdity. The under-discussed thing, I think, with this is, as well as it being their kind of preposterous goth opera album, it's Creeper doing a heavy metal album.
This was the thing that caught me off guard when I hit play on it. Was I kind of expected, you know, the goth opera, and then like when Sacred Blasphemy came, I mean, Cry to Heaven had some big riffs in it, but when Sacred Blasphemy hits up and you go, that's just straight up Maiden riffs, isn't it? Like,
yeah, that's a good point. I think to me, again, it was particularly like on the singles when they jumped out, like Creeper used to be a punk band, and like there are parts on this that are recognisable as that, but their riffs and their rhythm section would be, you know, punk.
Yeah.
Here, I mean, it makes sense because Ian Miles probably thinks about Metallica every day of his life, right? And I think that's what helps, part of what helps propel songs like Cry to Heaven to such delirious heights, because, like, you know, that has been out for a while now, but hearing that for the first time as a single was a case of, like, my face getting just more and more, like, open-eyed and shocked and giddy every single new element that comes in, right? Like, the bass kind of synth at the start, the guitar riff, the absurd fucking, like, soul choir backing vocals that got co-opted into goth rock songs in the 1980s somehow on things like Floodland, and then that fucking solo comes in, and then that key change at the end. It's so hilarious in the production, right? Like there's a stab in the chorus on Cry to Heaven where there's this keyboard like dun dun slam. It's like it's like a ridiculous dated sample you'd hear on like an 80s hip hop song, and I wouldn't trade it for the world on this. It's amazing. Like the theremin that transitions that solo into the bridge and then in the outro, like it's all of the stops pulled out, and it's the polar opposite of a Wallflower, right? Like it's maybe the most absurdly loud and proud rock song released in years.
It is so, again, like that coming like right off the back of Further Than Forever is just like, what a way to open your record, just in the most unashamed, bombastic way possible. If you go from that Nightmare Epic and then you go, oh yeah, here's fucking Cry to Heaven with its like I say goth synths and theremin solos, big crunchy riffs, like that ridiculously dramatic chorus. It's so cool though, and again, like Will on that song, he just nails the kind of like horny, like goth vampire. Like this album is fucking horny. It's so funny at points, like. But again, it's delivered in such a convincing way from Will that again, totally unashamed of how like sex driven this album is.
Yeah, and then Teenage Sacrifice is where I go, like, Creeper aren't a metal band normally, but they've written one of the catchiest heavy metal riffs of the year. Like, it's such a head nodder, such an earworm, and I know that, again, Ghost is a natural comparison. I think it's the shared root influence of both of the things is stuff like Ozzy Osbourne, and Bark at the Moon and The Ultimate Sin live strong in this, way more than they do any current Aussie material. And it's got that simple, spooky keyboard sound on every beat.
That psycho.
Yeah.
Like,
Just making it sound like
on the
spooky,
chorus.
scary skeletons as fuck. It's a masterclass in catchy, strutting, heavy metal riffing. And they've only just started doing that, just for a laugh this one time.
Cry to Heaven and Teenage Sacrifice, they were the singles. That was when my real expectation started to turn. Because like you say, that sort of early to mid-80s Aussie stuff, which I just like, Bark at the Moon is one of my favourite Aussie records, like beyond just the title track. And then cross-breeding those things with like Lucifuge, like in Cry to Heaven when Will goes full Danzig before the solo, like Queen of the Damned.
Queen of the Night! Yeah.
It's just like, it's so like on the nose, such a knowing move, but yet it works so well. The thing that gets me about these songs in particular is that it's so obvious where they're drawing from, but it never feels like it's just retro. Do you know what I mean? It's that thing that Ghost have done where they manage to sound like the 80s without sounding like something your dad might like.
It's not like a pastiche of it. It's like just loving it and kind of recreating it in a modern, authentic way.
Yeah,
exactly.
I love that I can add Summerlands to the list of bands I want Creeper to bring out on tour, along with like Unto Others and Grave Pleasures and all that stuff. There's none of this album that feels like that doesn't really scratch the Creeper itch for me, even though it is obviously quite a big transformation. They do factor in the familiar moments, but tweaked to fit into this world. Sacred Blasphemy carries itself with the energy of like an old Creeper punk song, but the guitar tone and the grandiosity is like this big hyperactive heavy metal theatre piece. The harmony solo on that sounds like Helloween could have written it, circa Keeper of the Seven Keys. And Chapel Gates is so fucking like voice wobbling rockabilly. In its root form, it could be a Salem song, right? Like, I am so about that. With aspirations to be Mary Shelley, but like, it's the most like OTT preposterous, every level of grandeur and magic piled on top of it, that a song like that goes in and out inside 2.5 minutes could be.
I love that song because it's the one like real just like classic punk Creeper moment. Again, you say it's Salem. It's got that kind of like surf rock thing where it's kind of
surf rock guitar lead in there, yeah.
That kind of comes from the Beach Boys being like an influence on the Misfits, being an influence on Creeper, kind of like that kind of lineage, isn't it? It's all part of that. But that song is so much fun. It's just such a just this joyous lift coming right out of the album, and it's just like God. They could still just write the best punk songs in their sleep if they wanted to. And I like that they just kind of tucked one in on this album to remind you of that, whilst they're going all over the place in all these other songs.
Yeah, and the funny lines, I'm telling you, she's getting laid but not to rest. That's where I go, behave. Like, I don't know how you could think that's not fun, Like,
I love it.
Creeper have never sounded more fun to be in than on this album. Like, you'd want to be in part of it. They sound like they're having an absolute ball. I really love Lovers Led Astray as well.
That's the moment, again, live, where I was like, they are having the time of their lives as this iteration of the band. Like, just when that riff, that strut on that riff is coming in, and
that's the Danzig, like the outlaw metal riff. The final 30 seconds or whatever when they lean into it is insane. But that mega dramatic knockout of a chorus, When I See You Laid and Slayed Across the Bed, is so good. I am fist clenching every time, and it has so much conviction in that and so much genuine chutzpah in delivering that. It took me a moment to notice how daft it is, because the whip cracks.
The whip cracks on the riff is my favourite part of the album. I love it so much.
Full on smacks of just whoosh, all over it.
Submission.
It's brazen. And then it also has those big fat synth bass slabs in the verses, and they're silly, right? And I mean that wholly positively. They are joyously silly. They're extravagant. They're escapist. They make me smile so much. It's such a bold, loud, fun song like Cry to Heaven is, and it works because of the full-on poise and determination that they put into the performance to make it work, to make you believe in it.
For me, I love how little wink, wink, nudge, nudge there is on this record. Because I think, the thing is, with songs like these, especially now, listening to them is a bit like a game of chicken, where you're waiting for you or the band to make it out as a joke. But
Can you live without your life in Teenage Sacrifice is like a Spinal Tap lyric, and I'm not thinking that when I'm singing it, because I'm in it, and Will is fucking Super Saiyan in it.
The one that got me was in the Ballad of Spook and Mercy, which as a song is late 80s Maiden crossed with the Coffin Shakers or something. And when it gets near the end and Will goes and I'll hold your hand, and there's a pause, I thought, is he going to say in hell?
Hell.
And he does. Like, by that point in the record, it's like, to me, it's funny that this is a concept album or a rock opera, because it's like, mate, we're not getting anywhere. Every song is about sex and hell and vampires and sex with vampires in hell. I have no idea where I'm meant to be by the end of the record. But again, you're just waiting for them to blink, and they never do. And it makes it so much more exciting to listen to.
Yeah, the way they've maintained like Ian Miles's ridiculous just rivers of champagne guitar hero moments, which properly took over on Sex, Death and Infinite Void, right? Like everyone remembers the Thorns of Love solo, but they fit them onto this kind of heavy metal opera feeling. The one on Ballads of Spook and Mercy is like you've got a taste of Orion inside totally different content that track is. I'm always interested to see how those like more, you know, unpunk or in this case unheavy metal songs from Creeper are going to shape up, because like honestly my favourite songs on Sex, Death and Infinite Void, a lot of them were those ones, like Poisoned Heart, 4 years ago, Paradise. They're fucking outstanding. Very different in vibe, but filling that role, you've got the Ballad of Spook and Mercy. To me, that gives off like the murder ballads, Nick Cave.
That was my point of reference for it as well. Which
like,
again, like Will fits so naturally in telling that story. He's got the right amount of like drama in his voice to make it compelling, but again, doesn't never sound silly, which again, he treads that line so perfectly. Yeah,
like the Curse of Millhaven lives strong in that track, in those verses. But Creeper, instead of giving off like the genuinely, you know, uncomfortable murderous edge that has, turn it into this, you know, sweeping hand-in-hand dark ballad, because it's not an actual murderer song. It's a romantic vampire song about creatures of the night, and it captures that beautifully. I think the missed opportunity, I guess, and if you were going to poll people on what they think of this album, I think it'd probably be the one consistent raised point. No Hannah songs in a pronounced lead role, especially after Ghost Over Calvary was so great, but I would have liked to hear the two of them like truly going at it on some of these more extravagant songs. What they have delivered in spades, which I think should not be overlooked and slightly makes up for it, the choirs and the backing vocals, which often Hannah is a big part of, are more exuberant than ever on this album, to the point that they could be borderline Christmas carols at some points. But the one where it's like for us all, it's like it's so they're excessive, and they are like they are popping off in every corner where there could be like a huge choir backing vocal. And I do love how that is used as a counterpoint to Will.
Yeah, I was because I think like no Hannah led song's fine, but I do think people kind of saying there's not a Hannah record. I'm like, she's contributing so much more in other areas.
She's not got a lead, but she's always there.
She's a much bigger presence musically on this album, I think, with all the synths and the choirs and all that. And even then, like I said, like she might not get a long song, but like one of my, again, I've said about so many voices, but one of the parts I do on this album is the closing bit of Black Heaven, where they're doing the vocal trade-off. I think that bit is so good. I mean, I love that song because that's just Creeper doing Depeche Mode.
Yeah,
and it's just fucking awesome. Like,
I'm getting to that. Let me tell you, because like Will, on Creeper's most horror-tastic album, right, he has put a bite into his performance that I think is like the magic extra ingredient that really completes these songs. It's there on Spook and Mercy, but, you know, we all know he's a great singer in his more usual range, and he can sell the shit out of a big emotional chorus. When he goes dark on this album, he turns on the snarl and the grimace before that last chorus of Spook and Mercy. The one where they fucking nail that is Black Heaven, which is one of the most for me songs Creeper have ever done. Like, I keep going back to play it. It's their full-on, like, undead darkwave track. Like, full, dark, western, goth, pulsating. The instrumental sounds beautiful. The command on that low range in the chorus.
Or how the original singer line as well.
No, like, I mean, in the chorus, the command, you know, the Die For Me, it's fucking perfect. And it's the way he leans into it, because that back half you're talking about, if I was going to isolate my favourite bit of this album, it's the second part of Black Heaven. It's not just like, a low baritone voice, right, that we can all do. It's injecting a spite and a bark into that, like, bassy register, which is hard to do, right? You know, the Black Heaven. And when you complement that and complete it with the Cry Little Sister bit, basically, from Hannah, sounds fucking unbelievable. And again, it's another song where you have this like amazing revelatory second half from the first setup, and that's how a trick that Creeper will be doing for ages, right? Like, again, the ending of Room 309 on Eternity in Your Arms, how it goes from like punk track to massive escalation in vocal harmony on the I've Been a Man Now a Ghost, ends up as a country song, basically. It's being translated through these other filters of influence here, and you're getting this
song is just outrageous. It's like Eurythmics crossed with Paradise Lost. It's like, on paper,
a lot of 1 second in it. Yeah,
this sounds like almost you'd think this being described to you it could be them flying too close to the sun, if you know what I mean. Like the whole 80s thing. Some bands, when they just step over that line, it can really get sketchy. Like that Muse record where it was all neon. You're just like, oh, fucking hell, please do not do that. Like this, it could be that. But again, it's that conviction and the skill and the great song at the heart of it. Like, it's close to laughable, but it dances on the ice. And it's like, it's so... For me, it's a contender for the best song on the record. There's a few that kind of mill around that spot. You just think, fucking, I wish rock clubs were still a thing, because these songs are getting written, and they're not going to end up in one, and it's not fair.
And I don't know exactly where I would put this in relation to the other Creeper albums. I'd find it very difficult to separate this and Sex, Death and Infinite Void, but, I mean, it's another knockout, that's as far as is important. I think of the big piano ballad tracks that close each one, this might be the best.
I think this is the best. I think it's, again, the Will Gould vocal performance on that chorus when he hits, and the magic he creates on that chorus with like the emotions just pouring out of him. Because All My Friends is obviously was very subdued and minimalist,
vulnerable as intended, and it's great for it.
But this is him going like, okay, we've done that. Now we're gonna go the most kind of just like rip your shirt open, just like epic. Like song, like rock star finale moment, but just delivering that and all the emotion. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, like it starts off really simple and intimate, like those last two did, and that's all well and good, right? You know, lovely, nice, they do that well. But holy shit, the other level that smashes through on that "Death fears us, we don't fear death." Also, the Lorraine Warren reference in it, so stupid. Shout at the Conjuring Heads, but that is. Like, in Will's performance alone at first, that power comes through. And it's one of his all-time best, right? Again, even adding in the grit and the harshness, like we said, in the big moments. The final chorus is just a mic drop, surely. Like, my eyes light up. It's magnificent on, like, an instinctive level, right? And who is writing songs like that today? Who is giving it that level of welly? It's a guaranteed win if you can write a song like that and send it stratospheric like that. People just have to go with it. It's against the law not to. But no one does it. And here it is.
I mean, for me, as someone who's had a more hostile reaction to Creeper's more subdued, ballady songs, this is just, like, it's so fucking good. Like, again, as soon as Further Than Forever came in and the album was gone, I said, wow, this is really bad out of hell. I thought, oh, if they close on a For Crying Out Loud, that would be nice. And they don't quite do that. But there's that kind of level of, when it's just Will and the piano, it's that level of, I don't want to say simple, because it's still so much ear candy, but it's kind of the right level of stripped back, where the drama isn't lessened, but it's a more intimate moment than you've had in the 35 minutes before.
Yeah, and I think that's the vibe with this album, right? It's, no one does this anymore, we miss it. What if we did it, and we did it fucking well? It's their longest album by a decent amount, even though it's less tracks than the previous one, and it goes by in a flash. I just know that the next time I see Creeper, I am going to be all out, full-on belting, top of my lungs, Teenage Sacrifice, or She Will Sit Away, like the same way I have been doing their other songs for years now. So that's the success. I mean, I want to see them play this whole thing, to be honest.
I mean, like I say, I saw them 2 days after the album came out, and they played... Like, what was it they played? So they played Cry to Heaven, Sacred Blasphemy, Lovers Led Astray, Teenage Sacrifice, Chapel Gates and Black Heaven. And every song, everyone was singing every word. Like, the crowd was so already in on all of those songs 2 days after the album came out. They've already landed with the audience. Like, and these were, like intimate release shows, the most diehard Creeper fans. But the songs already feel like perfect parts of the setlist that everyone is knowing and singing. So give that even more time for these songs to, worm their way in. And I think they're going to just... Again, like, what songs do you cut from a Creeper set now? Because they've just got 3 albums where you want to hear every song off them, basically. Like,
yeah,
and all those EPs. Like,
do a special Sanguivore exhibition at the London Palladium or something. Like, they've probably got some idea at some point, but let's go.